Andy. How are you doing today?
I am good.
Fantastic. Well, we've got Andy Peloquin here, author of a bunch of different books, Darkblade, Queen of Thieves, The Silent Champions, Heirs of Destiny, Dragonblood Assassin, and Cerberus. Is there anything I'm currently missing at this time?
No, those are all the series. Currently, there are more coming out next year. Each of them have, a bunch of individual books, but you got all 6 series names right. So well done.
Bam. I did my research. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of start things off by getting to know you, I guess, and having some of, the authors that we work with at the Foundry, and to get an understanding of what you are about as an author, and a lot of your processes that you do in creating your books, but also about the processes of mindset, and also things that keep you motivated and drive, but also like the understanding of how you really delve into your stories and how you develop your characters and your worlds and stuff. So I'm going to start off with the first question, and that is, why do you value your work, and why do you think others should read it?
That's a deeper and broader question than you typically start off with. So well done. Normally it's like, tell me a bit about yourself, easy low ball, but let's start with the hard ones. I think the value of my work lies in the humanity being explored. So the Darkblade is a great example. The series is on the surface a badass half demon assassin who kills. Not a whole lot of depth there. But as you go a little bit deeper, you get to see that it's very much the journey of a guy who has no business being a parent trying to bullshit his way through being a parent to a child who he's absolutely unsuited to taking care of. And that's a mirror of my own journey as a stepfather. Or the Queen of Thieves series, it is, how does a character who has been through the worst things imaginable, what becomes of her? How does she survive and thrive? What does she have to do? It just kind of asks these questions, or it drops the character into the situation and asks the question, well, what now? And then the story just kind of shows the humanity of these people. The adventures are always fun. There's always a lot of action. There's always intrigue and mystery and murder and mayhem. But at the end of the day, it's the characters and their struggles to be better, essentially. So I would say that my work has a very heroic flavor to it because these characters are in the worst possible situations I can put them in. And why do they make the right choice, or how do they get where they need to go? What essentially, it's how is a hero produced from the worst possible set of factors, and that for me is what drives me to write so much, because I love just kind of exploring these impossible situations.
And so you would say that the value of your work is about kind of exploring the humanity within inside your characters, in essence, then.
Yeah, and it's all about the most complicated and messy characters that I can create. The Cerberus series is a recovering drug addict who is a former special ops sniper who can't be in the special forces anymore. What does his life look like now that he no longer has that? What drives him? What's his purpose? The Darkblade series, this guy starts off, he's got no memories of who he is. He's a killer, but why? What's going on there? What's actually underneath the surface? It's all about that exploration of that sort of impossible human psyche that draws me so much to writing these stories.
So you would say that like the psychology a lot of the time is also a big pull into that reality and understanding.
Absolutely.
So I take it from, what you're saying there, that you've really spent the time understanding, and maybe from your own experiences, and or observations or research, really getting to understand the essence of what drives the individual, which obviously makes characters dimensional in the process as well. That's extremely interesting, and it's really awesome when you see writers, take that on board and really basically step into the shoes of their MCs. And and other characters throughout the book, because again, dimensionality, it's an important reality for sure. And so why would you say that other people should read these series as well? What aspects of that should draw them to it?
I mean, you're gonna get a story that will keep you very, very entertained the entire time. So if you're looking for a good escape, absolutely. But then I'd like to think that a lot of the characters that I explore, they may not be super unique. If you compare Queen of Thieves to Nevernight, Lies of Locke Lamora, Six of Crows, you can find a lot of similarities. But what makes the characters unique is sort of their journey. I mean, if you think about it, The Witcher, The Mandalorian, Leon the Professional, there's so many characters who fall into the exact same character archetype, but it's the set of circumstances that make them unique. So
Right.
let's follow a character that we all want to read about, and then see what happens when you give them a challenge that's very unique to them and their circumstances. So in that sense, you're going to get a familiar, entertaining read, and yet it will show you new things about characters and about yourself that you wouldn't get from
Mm,
other stories.
yeah. No, I think that's beautiful in the regard of, what draws people to books and and keeps them reading is the relationship, how they relate to the characters. And, you spoke to the value of, a lot of the struggles that your characters are going through on an emotional, psychological level. And that plays such a substantial role in our lives and has forever. But, as we've evolved as a society, we've been speaking to a lot of these wounds and these issues, and it's really interesting and beautiful as well that you're implementing aspects of that into your characters, so that in an essence, I'm supposing your goal is to inspire people to peer within themselves as well, and maybe offer some insights to their struggles, or to make people understand that they're not alone in their struggles, which is
Yeah,
sometimes the hardest aspect that I think a lot of people struggle with. So that's beautiful.
absolutely. It's that sense of connection, finding someone else who is broken and flawed and damaged and vulnerable and struggling like I am, like we all are.
Mhm.
Through the stories, you find that it just makes things a little bit easier and better.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, and I definitely think that anyone that writes in that way with that intention in mind is going to make a very immersive, interaction with the characters. We'll talk a little bit more about your world and world building as we go into that. I'm sure that if you take that level of consideration for your characters, I'm assuming you're doing something similar for your world. So that's amazing. Let's move on to the next question. How do you get yourself to settle into your writing process? And I put a note there because I lived in England for a long time, and I said, tea and biscuits or something else, perhaps?
So I am a creature of habit. I have structured my day to basically be the same every single day. I start writing at the same time every day. I
Wow.
go through the same routine every single day, just because it forces or simulates the creativity, even when you're not in the mood to create. If you don't really give yourself an out, you just have to do it. So I've got a couple of like pre-writing rituals where I got to make my coffee or my hot chocolate or whatever my hot sweet drink is,
Okay.
and then I check my Instagram. Like I check it twice a day before I start writing, just because it clears thoughts from my brain. It is a very
Yeah,
brainless activity.
it is indeed.
and then and then I have my writing playlist, and when I start writing, I it's on shuffle, and I just skip songs until I find one that I like, and as soon as I find one that I like, I start. Like there's no question. I get to a good song, I have to start writing. So it almost kind of,
Mhm.
even if the first words that I write aren't great, I'm in it, and that's how I kind of forge forward.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, and it's one of those things that I said to a lot of people in the past is I don't believe in writer's block, as a lot of people kind of speak to it. It's just the not the desire to not write, basically. It's something that I think a lot of writers that I have kind of spoken with and interviewed in the past is that they speak to an aspect of like, you just got to do it. You got to sit
Yeah.
down and, like, if you're not writing, you're going to be thinking you have writer's block because you're not even attempting it. And so a lot of the stuff that we talk about in the Foundry is that we talk about, like, just free form, like freestyle write. You know what I mean? Just like start writing anything just to get yourself into the mode of it. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're doing there, almost in that, that music. You have like an emotional connection to a piece of music, you get excited about it, and then you just start the process. And like you said, sometimes
Exactly.
it's not the best words, but at least you've got yourself in motion at that point. And then eventually it becomes really good as you start writing.
Yeah.
You get the rhythm
And then
going.
also,
Yeah.
so I end each chapter in a spot where I'm interested in what comes next. So let's say the main character is about to die, end of chapter. Number one, that makes people want to go, okay, I can read one more, right? That is that one, just one more chapter mindset. But also for me as a creator, if my character is about to die, how do I get him out of it? I don't need to figure out how to get him out of it when I finish writing the chapter. I just need to close the chapter, because as soon as I sit down, that triggers the brain. Okay, how am I going to write my way out of this? And so it's sort of another way to stimulate the creativity. Maybe you come up with a cool way that you never would have thought of the day before, because you're kind of panicking. Crap, I just put my character in this horrible situation. How am I getting out of it? Or the story goes in a totally new direction. But because you're in sort of in the middle of the action, rather than ending the scene, you want to get back to it. And it's not like you're starting it up. You're not building anything new. You're just kind of
Right.
taking it to the next, part of the action.
Ah, I like that. And so when you stop every time, you actually complete a chapter then. Like that's your
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, my benchmark is one chapter every writing session.
Okay. Okay. That's good. That's it. And so that's like a commitment you've made to yourself basically in that process.
Yeah.
Okay. And no
Yeah.
matter
There
how
was a
long the
time.
chapter or how long it takes you, correct?
Well, so typically, if I am writing a chapter and it's more than 2,500 words, I am doing something wrong. Like I am running on the thought a little too much.
Ah.
So there is almost always a way to cut a chapter at around the 1,500 to 2,500 word mark, depending on the chapter.
Mm.
But often I will find my energy, my creative energy, sort of flagging
Ah.
after a certain point, and it's typically a sign that okay, I'm going too long. I'm running too long winded on this event or this sequence. So then sometimes that actually stimulates kind of a well, what is the most dramatic thing I can do right here to just abruptly end it? And often that creates some interesting things that I never would have thought of otherwise, because I'm like, well, these two characters are having a conversation. It's kind of boring. Okay, the character pulls out a dagger and stabs the other one. Hard left turn, totally unexpected.
What? Where did that come from? Yeah.
Yeah, and so it jolts the reader and it jolts me creatively to
Mm.
figure out what just changed, what just shifted. And some of the most fascinating plot evolutions or developments happened because I'm like, all right, I'm getting to the end of that 2,000 word mark. I'm running out of steam creatively. I can feel myself tiring. My brain starts getting heavy. What do I do to end this chapter in a really dramatic fashion?
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. That's good. Well, no, that's great, and I'm sure, and I think that is a good place. That the 2,500 word mark is. Yeah, it's I've definitely read chapters as a narrator, and where I'm like doing like a 45-minute to an hour long chapter, and all of a sudden you're like, whew. Wow, that was a lot to digest, and especially in this day and age where people are, very much like, but how many minutes was that? Oh my God, it was over 5 minutes. It's so, oh God.
Yeah.
So that concept of being able to have, punchy chapters with a good, cliffhanger or a kick in the teeth right at the end of it, seems like a really good goal.
And it really does feed that addiction of just one more chapter. I could
Yeah,
just
yeah,
read
yeah,
one more
yeah.
chapter. And that's
Which is
how that's
important.
how you get people that's how you get people saying I was up till 4 a.m. I hate you. You ruined my day. Best messages ever, because it means that I kept doing that just one more chapter thing just enough to keep them coming back.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And yeah, we'll discuss that more. I've got some more targeted questions specifically around that as well. Let's move on to the next one. So do you do everything yourself, or do you work with a team of people?
By everything,
Meaning,
what does that
like,
mean?
besides editing, I would assume, but I mean, from marketing to, design, graphic design, like, do you have a team of people that you work with? Your editor, I'm assuming you don't edit your own book. So I'm assuming that you have like a collection of people that you've come to trust and work with over the years.
Yeah, so I have cover artists, interior sketch artists. I like doing little character sketches inside my books
Hmm.
so that, if it's a cool looking character, the readers actually get a visual of what they look like.
Right.
And then I have an editor. I have a team of beta readers who I send the book to, and they, chop it up and tell me, do this better. You're doing things bad here. Make this more interesting, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
I do all my own marketing. I do all my own social media. I do all my own interior layout, like formatting.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm terrible with art. So anything artistic, I just hire out someone who is much more talented than I to do it. And it's also such a time suck if I try to do it all myself.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so, when finding these people and choosing them, what are some of the processes that you went through in acquiring, for instance, your editor and your artists that you work with?
Well, so I got really lucky with my editor. I was at an author conference. I had a book written that I was shopping around to traditional publishers and, sorry, agents looking to get it traditionally published. And at this conference, there was just sort of this industry mixer, and there was a publisher there. And so I basically just sat down at their table and said, "Why should I publish with you?" Fast forward 6 hours, I have spent the entire time talking with their editor. It turns out that he and I are like a match made in professional heaven. I signed a contract to publish with them because I want to work with him. He's an amazing person to work with. After I finished publishing with them, I messaged him, "Hey, would you mind, doing other work for me?" And he's like, "Every book you write from now until I'm no longer editing, I will do it." So I have
Awesome.
worked with him on every single book. I've tested out a few other editors and they've been great, but it's more like to test them to see if they are an editor I would recommend when an author asks me, "Oh, who's an editor?" Because I don't want to share mine. I want to keep him to myself. So that
I don't
because
know.
it happens. I've shared cover artists and interior artists, and then they just got too busy,
Yeah,
and then they couldn't take on my project, or they started charging too much. When they're worth it, awesome. But I'm very leery of sharing it, not because I don't want to help my author friends, but because I need to make sure that the quality of my books stay consistent, which means working with the same people.
yeah,
So I'm always testing cover artists. Like I've got as many author friends as I can make in the fantasy author community. And I'll always ask them, what artists did you use here? I'm checking ArtStation. I'm checking um, a bunch of Facebook groups looking for new artists, testing out their skill, hiring them to do a piece here, a piece there, doing stuff for my Kickstarter books. Just always trying to keep a few people connected so that I never find myself in a position where I don't have an artist.
it's a really good insight to have for sure. And I can tell by how you do a lot of your social media and stuff, and the support that you give to a lot of the other authors, that you're pretty good at networking as well. Even reaching out to you and contacting you, you're very quick to respond, which is appreciated. In this world, I think there's an aspect that I really appreciate when authors that do find success also support up and coming authors in their process too. So no, it's beautiful, and it's good to know. And I think a lot of definitely a lot of the authors I work with, and I'm sure plenty of other up and coming authors out there, always kind of ask those questions. It's like, where do you find, like, I see it all the time. Where do you find your editor? How do we trust an editor? What's a good price to have your book edited at? And
Yeah.
it really it comes down to trust. And I think that was something that I really appreciate about what you said there, and how you found him and how you built the relationship. And that's really what it is. It's like there's tons of fantastic editors out there, but some of them might not click with you, even though they might be like the best editor for Brandon Sanderson, but for you, they might not be the best editor for you. And
Yeah.
so it's about trust and the connection that you have with someone. And they also get to know you. There's an intimate level that is involved in the process that I think is such an important aspect of building that. And like in an essence, it's like building your own independent team. And yet, like you said, you have to find a ton of different, graphic designers and artists because, there's tons of people out there doing it, and you
Yeah.
never want to fall into a place where you don't have somebody available. So
Yeah. And I'm always planning 6 to 12 months ahead. So it means that the next book's cover is already done by the time I start writing it. Or the editor is locked in for the next book as soon as I finish it. Just because that last minute crunch is my nightmare. You hear stories about people having their pre-orders canceled because they didn't get the book up in time, or the book going to launch and it's not fully edited, or the cover's not done, or
right.
like I don't want any of that. So it's like if I can start now planning 6 to 12 months ahead, I can deal with the stresses that are going to arise later without having to add these ones on top of them.
Yeah, exactly. So in an essence, you're saying it's really good to plan ahead.
Oh, 100%. Something that I have started telling people is the day that you think your book is ready to launch, set your actual launch date 1 year ahead, because in that 1 year, you can lock down your cover, you can lock down your editor, you can put together a launch plan, you can learn marketing and advertising, you can start building your social media platform. That year is just golden because you know where the goal is. The goal is X date, X book. So you start building towards that,
Yeah.
and that gives you a way better chance of success. You can't control so much of this process, but if you actually do what you can control, which is putting in the work to build your platform, build your newsletter, build your social media, get people to connect with you, the person, before you try to sell them the book, you're going to have a much better chance of success.
No, and we'll talk more about that, but that's a very valuable bit of insight that I think a lot of authors need to have from the get-go. That understanding of writing the book is the first part. It's and in essence, it's almost, for a lot of people, it's the easier part, because the creative mind is wanting to do that, where all of the stuff around marketing and branding and doing the social media game and building up your email marketing campaigns and stuff, it's a lot. A lot of people struggle with
That's
that.
the sucky part.
It's the sucky part. It really is. And I've got some questions targeted around them, and actually this next one's kind of moves into talking a little bit about marketing and also speaking to some of these parts of like how. So, what is the process of setting up your Kickstarter campaigns, and do you promote them yourselves, or do you work with a team of people or a marketing team, should I say?
So the Kickstarter campaigns, I've done them all myself because I watched some of my other author friends do it. And talking with them, I realized most of it I could do myself. Now, could I have done it better working with other people? Absolutely. But so far, they've worked well enough that I'm satisfied with the outcome. That being said, I'm already thinking about the next one. What am I going to do? But I connected, like my biggest problem is being in Canada, shipping is an issue because of Canadian Post shipping prices are way higher than USPS.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, I had to work with Merrick Books, which is kind of a warehousing, storage, fulfillment solution, who also happens to handle a lot of logistics around printing and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of do a one-stop shop for authors who want to make a Kickstarter happen and don't have the resources. They've been great to work with. So that is kind of why I have the confidence to make this happen, because if I have a question, I can either go ask them, or I can ask any one of my 30 or 40 author friends who have launched successful Kickstarters.
Right.
So in that sense, I've been able to do it because, like you said, it's my network. It comes down to the people that I've gone out of my way to make friends with, just so I can pester them for information. So I can basically, I tell them, listen, how did you do this? Okay, I'm going to steal your best secrets and try to do it myself.
Yeah.
And they're like, Do it, because that's what it comes down to. All of us are just authors trying to bullshit our way through this impossibly complex game. And so it's like, well, here's what worked for me, here's what worked for someone else. Let's try to put all those pieces together and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the network makes makes it all work. It really does kind of combine a lot of, the elements of other people's experience, and then, basically condensing it and how you want to do it. And, with your themes in place, but there is definitely strategies out there that are, tried and true. They're proven to work, put in the effort. And, from what I'm hearing you say too, is a big part of that process is also making sure that you really bolster your fan base even prior to even thinking about that. Trying to do a Kickstarter when you're first starting off, for maybe some small amounts, maybe to get an editor, you can probably get your family to help pony up some stuff, might be viable. But if you're trying to get like 20 to 30 to $40,000 in your pocket, it's probably not as likely with just family and close friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
So
a very different process.
yeah. And so there's definitely, that network, as well as how you network and how you, interact with your fans and people, and, how you funnel them in from just interested into, serious fans that will read anything that you put out there. And just out of curiosity, what is, the time span that you had to really focus, like from dedicated focus of intent of, from your first steps of marketing to building up a really strong fan base from like day one to where you are now? Like how long and what was that process? What it'll look like?
Well, so here's kind of a secret that's not really a secret, is a massive amount of my success is due to advertising. When I first published in 2015, I had a small fan base, and they're still with me. But I was continually, building my newsletter, building my Facebook group, building my platform, doing all the kind of things that you need to do. And that didn't necessarily translate into success. The day that I learned Facebook and Amazon advertising, I think I threw about $5,000 to $10,000 at my book launch in the first 10 to 30 days, just on advertising. It paid off. The book succeeded. It has continued succeeding throughout all these years. Every launch I've done so far, I've approached the same, and it's done, varying degrees of well. Um, my fan base is continually growing and evolving. I mean, I have about 10,000 people on my email newsletter, 10,000 followers on Facebook. I've grown from, I don't know, 700 to 12,000 fans on Instagram over the last year, 5,000 on TikTok over the last year. But again, everything is just like one more little piece of the puzzle. But the main driver still is the ads that I'm running every single day. So the day that I learned advertising, literally, that was the day that everything changed for me.
Yeah. And it's a really valuable thing to hear you say that, and it's often what I talk to a lot of the authors I work with. And can you repeat the number as well, just for everybody, of how much you threw into that first release? Because I think that's a really valuable lesson that a lot of people need to know. It takes a lot of financial commitment to really get through the morass of people out there trying to promote their books. If you only have a few $100s to promote it, you're not going to get much traction.
No. Yeah, no. So I always tell people, if you can set aside $10,000 for the launch of your first book, that includes editing, that includes covers, all the things that you need to do. But a massive chunk of that goes into advertising,
Yeah.
because if you think about it, $5,000 is $160 on ads in a day. That's not going to move the needle a whole lot because of the high cost of the, cost per click on Amazon, because of the low conversion rates on Facebook. So really, if you want to really, really make a book, and I do mean like, $500 to $1,000 a day kind of level of income on one book alone, or the first two books in a series, you really have to throw some money at it. That's not to say you just throw money you have to be smart about it. And this is where
Strategic.
learning the ins and outs of advertising and testing things and doing all of that comes in handy. So before I launched my series in 2018 and threw $10,000 at it, I launched an anthology earlier in the year and tested out advertising on that anthology to get a sense of how the platforms worked, to get a sense of different types of ads and how they worked and all of that. And I continue to test and evolve my advertising process every single year, every book launch, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But having that mindset of you are literally going to have to spend money to make money. There's no other way to do it in this market right now, given how difficult it is to break through Amazon's algorithm. Like, don't count on being a unicorn that just succeeds magically. Count on being the author who has to grind every day and spend money
Yeah.
to see that kind of mid-level success. If you do that, when you see better than mid-level success, you have succeeded in amazing ways. When you don't, if you don't, you are prepared for this mindset of it's just a grind. It's just one more step in building the thing. One thing that a lot of new authors kind of fail to take into account is that this is a long game. The fact that you love writing so much means you will probably be able to do it from now until the day you die. There's no retiring from the love of creation, right? You may want to retire from the business side of things, right? To do that, you need to have your career set up a platform of dedicated readers who will buy your books. But really, you love sitting down and writing. You're not going to stop that just because you're not working anymore. That's going to follow you probably well into your later years. So if you could plan, okay, this book that I'm writing now is just the first in 100 before I die, or 30 or 60, whatever that number is that you think is feasible. It changes the way you approach things, because there's not this urgency to get that book out and just be out there and I need to put my book out and have my name out and then nothing. That's failure, right? That happens to so many authors. There's this urgency, this rush, and it leads to failure. If you are strategic and intentional and cautious in the way that you approach your launch, you take the time to learn the things, you take the time to build, you take the time to put all the groundwork in and build that solid foundation. When you launch, you are way more successful.
Yeah. I liked your statement about the year. When you think that your book is ready for release, spend another year basically building out everything that you're going to need for the release, and that's often what I talk to a lot of the authors about, in the process of this, from day one, with a lot of what we do at the Foundry, and even with, Nicole and her process, she's working with people from the beginning. They don't even have a story. And she almost automatically, immediately at the beginning of that process, is advising them to start building these things, even if it's small amounts at first, and you'll get more amped up, I think, too, as you get through the process of it. And like you said, if you can have a lot of those elements constantly building while you're working through it, that when you get to that release moment, then spend another year to get everything else ready to go. And then you'll slay the beast and make sure that you save the money to promote it properly. And that's the other thing is you're probably, you are most definitely working a day job as well as writing in this process. And, just to set aside money for that and, the marketing aspect. And anyone that I've spoken to that, like you said, has found any success from mid-range to upper has invested large quantities of money into their art and, marketing and learning how to do it. Or if you don't want to do it yourself, hire somebody that is very good at it and knows what they're doing, because it can be time consuming. And I think a lot of people do struggle sometimes with, the non-creative aspect of that, and having to stare at statistics and numbers and demographics, and I know it drives me crazy. I pay people to do it for me.
Annoying.
So I understand and relate to that, but it's amazing to see the level of commitment that you've dedicated to that, and it's inspiring in a lot of way too. It shows that anyone is capable of doing this, and obviously having a really good story is equally as important as well. But as we know, there's been plenty of not so great stories out there that have
Yeah,
been marketed fantastically. And guess what? They
exactly.
sell tons of books.
Exactly. So this is something that I would say is probably the most important takeaway is that authors need to understand the basics of marketing their books. Even if they hire out to have someone else do it, if they understand marketing, they can direct the efforts of the people, or they can create the creatives, the videos, the images, the
Right.
graphics, the slideshows, all of that. But if they understand the basics of marketing and advertising, even if they hire out, they can make sure everything is on track. And no one is ever going to love and understand your book as much as you do. So no one will ever be able to market it as effectively as you will, because you're going to be thinking about it. You're driven to, okay, what's a cool new idea? What's something to try? You test, you create, you come up with new things. Random lightning strike inspirations do happen that can be game changing, but you have to be in that mindset of, how do I do what I'm trying to do or what I need to do better? And if you're just like, I'm going to write books and let someone else handle the marketing, you are missing a very important pillar of the entire indie author, I will say, but probably even traditionally published authors,
Yeah.
the
You
ones
should. Yeah.
who have the most success. I think they're the ones who actually do get involved a lot in the marketing. They've got they're active on social media. They engage with people directly, even if they're not, shilling their books like a lot of indie authors have to. There is still an element of marketing that is done successfully. So
Yeah.
that's almost more important than writing a good book. Writing a great book is right at the top of, like, that's 100% priority, and marketing is like 98 or 99%
Yeah.
priority. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, it's an interesting one in a lot of ways. It's kind of, and I like what you said there too, that it is that aspect of you as the author will really know the best way that, and if you've already tested out, your audiences, so you know the best ways to promote to your audience, and it's good
Exactly.
to also really test out your demographics. I work with an author by the name of John Maldonado, and he's got a book, and the biggest thing about what he was capable of doing was he learned marketing right from the get-go. And that's why he's sold, a few thousand books already. You know what I mean? And when I came across him, I was like, wow, it's really impressive that you're, selling this many books on your first book. And he goes, yeah, I just spent the time. I really learned about like what my demographic is and the types of people that are, interested in what I'm doing. And, knowing the kind of imagery and kind of engagement that they're going to be drawn in by, as well as any audio content or visual aspects of it that are going to intrigue them, then you're already winning. And so if you do hire someone to do it, from what I'm hearing you say, it's to really have a good grasp on that, as well as continuing to personally engage with your audience on that level as well.
Yeah.
Because that, I think, in a lot of ways, it pays a lot more dividends, because people will respect you as a person and not just the person behind the book. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
totally.
There's a disconnect, I think, that happens a lot of the time in that reality. And that's why I really appreciate when I reach out to authors such as yourself and they respond quickly. It's you. It's not your social media person going, oh, I'll have
Yeah.
Andy get in touch with you. you
Yeah,
know?
no, that personal touch makes all the difference in the world. I mean, I love it when I can reach out to my favorite authors and they'll talk with me, they'll share my posts, they'll respond to, silly comments, whatever the case is. There is this sort of innate sense of connection that engenders. So if you are not doing that, you are missing out on probably one of your most important tools for converting a random person who may or may not have heard of your book into a diehard fan.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I think we've strayed a little bit away from kind of the original topic, but I think you did answer a lot of the questions around the Kickstarter as well and the promotional marketing aspect. I'm glad that we kind of like spiraled into the marketing stuff, because it's as you mentioned, a very crucial
Yeah.
aspect of being a successful author in this day and age. And I really appreciate the insights that you were able to provide for that, because that is one of the biggest questions that I think every single author is asking and fearing at the same time.
Yeah.
So let's move on. I got quite a few more questions, and we'll pop through them. And I don't need to necessarily ask all of them. I think you're answering chunks of them too in this process, as we will find.
Okay, good.
Um, so the next question is: can you tell us about your main characters from your books and what inspired their story? And I know we already spoke to the emotional aspects of it and how you draw from that as the essence of what drives, makes you unique as a writer in that essence. But I guess a lot of the time, people write characters that they relate to personally. Like I know, for instance, in one of my books I'm working on currently, one of the main characters is similar to myself. I used a lot of my personal details to weave into the story, and that's pretty common in a lot of ways. So I guess my question is for you, like seeing that you have multiple series out, I'm assuming that they're not all you. There might be one of them that it is, but
I
I'd
think
love to get some insights.
I think authors can't help putting little bits and pieces of themselves into every story. So
Right.
if we dissect all of these stories, the Darkblade series is very much my journey as a neuroatypical or neurodivergent step parent. Right, that's beneath the badass assassin. That's the story of myself that's being explored there. The Queen of Thieves series is sort of a look at or sort of a mirror to my own resilience as a human being in the shit that I've dealt with over the course of my life. Obviously, it's hyper dramatized and different, but at the same time, when I write the character, it's like this is who I would like to be or who I imagine
Uh,
myself as this resilient, you know, obviously I'm not going through the same thing, but that's sort of something that I carry. The Silent Champions is the nobility of purpose and mind that I hope to embody or that I would love to embody when the character is presented with the choice to do the easy thing or the right thing. My innate sense of an honor and nobility says obviously do the right thing even if it's hard. Maybe I may not reflect that so much in my own life, but in my the makeup of my personality and my psyche, that is the driving force, is what's the right thing to do even if it's hard. The Cerberus story is that one started as an homage to the sniper who I talked to do a lot of research for the Silent Champions, and I loved the idea of this character who is in a sort of Iron Man Tony Stark futuristic suit of armor and a total badass, and then sits in a wheelchair when outside of his armor because he can't walk. And it's just
mm,
this exploration of kind of the badass and the broken, flawed human beneath. And that really plays to sort of in my own understanding of the world. The face that we show the world is often very different from who we really are, or our perceptions of ourselves may be one thing, but then the reality is something else. So these are just examples of ways that in some cases every character contains bits and pieces of ourselves, whether it's who we are
mm.
or who we aspire to be or wish we could be, or they embody some virtue that we think is very important in the world. And I think that no matter who the author is, they really can't get away from that, because I don't think I could write a character whose principles are disaligned with my own. They have to be, you know, they have to be in alignment. Otherwise, I really can't wrap my head around them. I can write villains who have other principles, or
Right.
antagonists, or even supporting characters. But at the end of the day, the thing that anchors me to a character and makes me want to come back and keep writing it is this reflection of myself as I see myself, or some aspiration, or some hope, or goal, or struggle.
Yeah, it's really beautiful that I really appreciate the way that you kind of picked that apart too, and really kind of delved into these aspects and attributes that we play out inside of our own psyche, as well as how we project them into reality. It's part of sometimes the subconscious aspect of our psyche trying to project itself into the real world, and I think it's also just such a beautiful way of being able to express ourselves as humans, to write into these aspects, or write these aspects into our characters to bring it to life, even if they're not necessarily someone that we are fully, like you said, we're aspiring to this, but that's something that maybe even helps you drive to become that over time.
Mhm.
And so I don't know, there's something therapeutic, I guess, in the essence of, doing this writing um, process is you get to really discover a lot about yourself too. And I feel like
Yes.
that's a big part of what you're speaking to in an essence is your self discovery about things that you might not have processed in another way that you're able to do in the process of writing. And
Absolutely.
it's such a beautiful little quandary down the path of our psyche that, I think um, is spoken to in the world of writing, but it's not always observed. And I really appreciate you sharing that today, because I think it also helps, people to listen and will hear this, that they basically will get an insight to what you're working on. And I think that also helps
Yeah.
in an essence for your readers to connect with you even more too, in that essence.
Absolutely. And when you kind of talk about it. So one thing that I realized a few years back, I was diagnosed with Asperger's on the autism spectrum, and there was sort of this time where I didn't talk about it with people. And then over the course of a couple of years, I realized that there were a lot of people in my immediate circle, online and in real life, that also had some sort of, mental health struggle, whether it was, bipolar disorder or chronic stress or depression, anxiety, whatever the case is. And I kind of started leaning into that more. And I found this article that was like 83% of people in this one Australian study, 6,000 people were studied, 83% of them had some kind of mental health problem. Not not a smaller number. 17% of the people studied were totally cool psychologically. The rest of us were just
Wow.
messy. And I was like, you know what? That really opens my eyes to understanding that I'm not alone in this. So I started leaning into this in
Mm.
my email newsletter. When I'm talking to people, I started sharing my struggles with whatever I was dealing with. Even now, when I send out an email, I will go to Psychology Today and I will scroll through the articles. And if there's something that really resonates with me, I'll write about that, because people don't want to know, yeah, I've done another book, or that's not the most important thing about me. Sure, I've written another 10 chapters since the last email,
Right.
but why? Why do I care about that? But now if I say, hey guys, I'm struggling with this. This is my current issue. There enough people are going to be like, oh, I remember when I had that, or oh, I'm dealing with that right now, that it really gives them something to anchor them to me as a human being, so that when I write about it and I tell them, guys, I'm writing about this in my story right now. Here's what I'm dealing with. Here's how it's coming into play. They read the story, they connect with me as a human being. And that is what makes the author reader experience so compelling, is that connection. A lot of it happens unconsciously, because like some of my favorite authors, I wish I knew what they were dealing with, because it would make the story so much more interesting. A really good example of this is John Gwynne. His latest novel, Fury of the Gods, came out, and he lost his youngest daughter a few years back, and for the longest time he was struggling to write, but he made those struggles, like, he told his readers about that.
Mm.
So when I go into reading his newest book, and maybe it's not as good as some of his other books, or maybe there's parts in there that I didn't necessarily agree with, but I was like, this is a reflection of him, shaped by this event, and all of a sudden it takes on a totally different light,
Yeah.
because maybe I'm like, I can't imagine how I can't picture myself writing, some dude hacking and slashing with swords after I just lost my wife or my daughter. So let's reframe my perspective on this to that. And all of a sudden it makes the story so much more complex, so
Mm.
much richer, all of that.
Mm.
Another really good example, I just finished reading this novella by an author, Rob J. Hayes. Some of his books in the past have been my absolute favorites. This one that I read was not his best work. I got to the end, I was like, okay, this was a fine story. And then I read his afternote, and it was like, I wrote this story as a means of processing my brother's death. And it just totally reframed the entire story. Because what was like, oh, it's not the best adventure, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, this is him walking me and himself through the feelings of his brother's death through the course of a story. It's what I did in The Silent Champions. I wrote this entire series so I could have the character standing over his father's grave, processing the death the same way that I was unable to process the death of my oldest brother years and years ago until I wrote that story. And all of a sudden, I understand how I feel, how I think, all of that because I took the time. So when you get to know that, when you get to see the author beneath the story, behind the story,
Mm.
then there is the sense of connection and everything becomes so much more real.
Yeah, that is the depth right there. And I think in a lot of ways, having those insights is what will really give us that deeper connection, as you spoke to as well. Really connecting with them on multiple levels, not just the story, but where that story is coming from.
Yeah.
I went to storytelling school in East Sussex at Emerson College, and part of our course process was telling biographical stories. And so in that essence of kind of what we're talking about here, it's like taking little bits of essence from your life, these sparks of inspiration or sadness or fear or hatred or whatever it is, and being able to weave them into the greater web of the story, but it coming from a place where you are pulling the reader to the point where you bring the fear or the sadness just enough where your own, this is how we were told to do in storytelling school, you bring just a little bit of that sadness into your voice, almost like a little quiver. And you can do that in writing as well, and then the reader goes all the way and they cry.
Yep.
That's the
Absolutely.
beauty and magic, I think, that we can conjure in the creation of storytelling, and why it's been such a magical aspect since the dawning of time, dawning of
Yeah.
language, at least. And so the reality of that is, really crafting aspects, but also I think going back to talking about how you engage with your audience, it's a really, like you said, it's not just, oh, hey, I made it 3 more chapters today, whatever, it's like, that's cool. If they're avid fans, they're going to want to know when the next book's going to be done, but it's good to also add personal aspects in there, especially on social media, obviously the
Yeah.
algorithms and stuff like that as well. But it's, the aspect of really connecting with your audience on more of an intricate level. So when they read those sections, that moment is invoked. Like you said, you might not have connected the same way with what was going on there if you didn't know that about them. And so
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
beautiful. It's beautiful.
And so it's something that I've brought into even my book reviews or my book recommendations on Instagram, on TikTok, on social media. Why does this book resonate with me? Not just, oh, the story was great, there was tons of cool action, the world building was amazing, the magic system, like no one gives a shit about that. I mean, people, they do, but really no. What they want to know is what made you feel about this book in some way. If I say, guys, there was this moment, anybody who I talk to who has read this one book, Empire of the Damned, I don't even have to tell them the scene. They all know the exact same scene because it hits them too. Or like the Lord of the Rings, my friends, you bow to no one. That is an emotional gut punch that everybody has felt some kind of way about. And this is where it gives you that really deep emotional experience, and that's what people want to hear about when you do a book review, when you're talking about the story that you're writing, whatever the case is, because stories tap into and inflame emotions. That's what you need to give them.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely the nail on the head there in that essence. Although it's interesting because again, in storytelling school we talk about the 4 elements, earth, fire, water, and air. And in that process of writing, it is things that we do as often innately as writers to keep the engagement happening. But what holds all of those elements together is the emotional content. And if you don't
Yep.
have it's like the sinew, it's like the bits that hold everything else together. It's what makes things dimensional and real and visceral. They're going to cry, they're going to be angry, they're going to be upset. You kill off a character they love, they're like, no, they're going to rage, you know what I mean? And like,
Absolutely.
some people might hate you, but they're still going to buy the next book because they love it.
Yeah.
You've got them by their heartstrings, and that's the value of it for sure, man. Well,
Absolutely.
I have a lot of questions. We are kind of getting close to the end of our time here, but I personally I have time. I don't know if you do. So
Yeah, I'm good.
okay,
Fire
okay,
away.
cool. All right. So how did you develop the worlds and settings in which your stories take place? And I guess in essence, where did you what sources of inspiration did you draw from to create these?
So I am a world building as needed kind of guy. I am never going to give more than is absolutely necessary, just because my when I envision the stories, I don't necessarily see things in my head. Like, I don't get that vivid picture. I am not I don't have aphantasia. I can see, mental images, but I don't get it very, very detailed.
Mm,
So it's like I'm just going to build just enough to make things interesting and relevant and to set the settings for the characters. So that's kind of my approach to world building. My city, I build it as I need it. The gods, the magic, some things need to be developed a little bit more ahead of time because they're pervasive through the entire book, or they're
right.
the whole, the magic system for the series, or whatever the case is. That gets a bit more time, but it's very much as needed. And that just kind of comes in the moment. It comes from inspiration. You go, I just came back from a trip to Portugal earlier in November. I just took a ton of pictures of castles and, manor houses and palaces. And who knows if I'm ever going to use any of those elements, because when I'm in the moment of creation, I may not necessarily be thinking that way. But everything that I absorb into my head, whether through TV or
Mm,
whether through, travel, whatever the case is, that will somehow come out. A really good example of this is I went to Argentina earlier in this year, and I was writing a story set on a pirate ship at the time. Over the course of the story, the pirates started talking, or I created the pirates to have that Argentine brusqueness and insulting vocabulary, because I was like,
mm,
oh, this is perfect. It is exactly what would make this story more fun than just, regular pirates. So it became a whole thing, and the society shaped itself around that. I
mm,
went to Hawaii last year, and I had such an amazing time at the Polynesian Cultural Center that I'm my next book, Darkblade 10. Well, not next. There's a few books between now, but the next book in the Darkblade series is going to be set on an island that is drawn from all the Polynesian islands and then sort of set in Diamond Head crater sort of terrain. And it's just I'm somewhere and something sparks an idea, or it gives me a feeling, and I'm like, this is something really, really cool. So, as an example, the Diamond Head crater in Hawaii, you see Waikiki, you see the buildings, you see all the skyscrapers, and you turn around, and it's just like Jurassic Park, like
mm,
literally, pure nature, and just this idea of how everything can be so secluded and isolated. It's a kilometer away from the city, and yet it looks like it's untouched. There is something, it just like it triggered an imagination. It triggered this
mm.
image in my head. And so
Yeah, yeah.
all these story world building elements, you just kind of experience life as much as you can. You watch TV, you read books, you see things, and then you draw on it as needed. Well,
Yeah.
that's my approach to it, at least.
No, it's always interesting talking to authors because everyone's approach to this reality varies so drastically. Some people are, the planners. They're very formulaic. They've, even before finishing or even writing the full story, they've got all of the notes. And I've come across that working with authors before as a narrator. I'm like, hey, I just need character lists and stuff, and they're like, this stuff, and you're like, whoa, like it's crazy. And that's
Yeah.
people that spend that time. But I also, really appreciate the your approach to this reality too, because it's I like it as needed. You know what I mean? And it's something, I thinking about this, with Brandon Sanderson. He is not the most floweriest of writers.
No.
He's not. But what and he's also he doesn't go into deep description like Robert Jordan or J.R. Tolkien. And that's why the other Wheel of Time series had a better
Yeah.
pace. But he knows how to really push the narrative along and appropriately use description to build the scene enough. And in storytelling, they teach us about the concept of don't give your audience too much. You want
Yeah.
their imagination to fill in the gaps. And so that's the grand thing about your style of doing this, is that you allow that imagination to wander through your world and them creating it. And guess what? Everybody's, visuals of what that looks like is going to be different. You know what I mean?
It's
And
just whatever makes contextual sense to them.
them, yeah, and you give them enough to be able to fill in those dots, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it, and it's also just a good way to do storytelling in that essence, because you're not going to bore the shit out of people that are like fire and earth and water and stuff. You got this like the description after the
Yeah.
description and the hills as they cascaded down into the rivery shadows, but you're just like, it can be cool, do it, but push the narrative. Let's go. Like, let's not spend
It's
two
it's
pages
called
on it.
it's called a waterfall. We're moving on.
It's called a waterfall. Fill in the dots yourself. Get back to me on what you thought
Yeah.
about it, So
Great big pretty waterfall. There's some splash in the air. There's sunlight. We're moving on to the
yeah.
killing
Maybe
parts.
there was some berries flying around. Who knows? No, I think that's great. Cool. Let's move on. I think that's beautiful, though. I appreciate the more simplified but very very helpful way of teaching people how to push the narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, we've kind of spoken to this question, and we can kind of move past it unless there's other aspects to this that you feel that you want to kind of explore in our conversation. What are some of the themes or messages you explore in your book? And I know that we, kind of spoke to the aspects of the psychology of your characters and stuff, and mental health. We've also touched on a little bit here as well. And I can see that those are definitely themes as well. Let's embrace a little bit more of the archetypal themes, I guess. You know what I mean in this regard.
I mean, I love the what is it called? The diamond in the rough kind of character. I love the candle in the darkness. Like, I mean, Darkblade, the whole series is an assassin killing people dying all around him, and yet he's a hero because he makes the right choices. Even just one at the right time, no matter how much it sucks. So just having that, like, I think I lean to the darker worlds because it makes those small acts of goodness or heroism shine brighter. And I think that's kind of the way that I see life.
Mm,
That's something that I kind of I am an optimist at the core
mhm.
because I want to believe that people are going to do the right thing. Circumstances may suck, but people are going to do the right thing. That's kind of something that shines
Mm,
through. No matter how dark all my stories get, there is kind of that hopefulness, that optimism. It's often low key, but there is kind of this sense of relief, of potential for things to get better in the future.
yeah. No, it's good to kind of have an understanding of those themes that drive people, and also that are going to make people, even though there's tragedy and death and all of this gory madness that's going on, there's an innate aspect of most of us as human, unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath, that we want to relate to, yeah, yeah, right. That we want to relate to something that has goodness or beauty, or, even if the character is kind of evil a little bit, that there's a value of his that is still relatable to the context of it, or sometimes they have a supporting character that helps fill in that role a little bit too.
Yeah.
And so there's, it's good to have those kind of themes that bring people back to it. I guess I want to shoot a question out of here. This isn't on here. Is how would you go about writing like a character that would feel out of the norm for you, that's kind of just like, I know that your main character from Darkblade is an assassin and stuff, but like, think about trying to write a purely evil character, you know what I mean, where it's like, what redeeming quality would you have to add in there to give that hint, that glimmer of goodness or hope that he might become a better person?
I think it's all about making, like, a really really good one is sort of a willingness to grow. in
Uh,
the sense of you can start off as an absolute piece of shit, but you can't end as an absolute piece of shit. You
right.
can end up as sort of a piece of shit, but as long as you're trending in the right direction,
Mhm.
that's enough.
Yeah, yeah. The cycle of Iran. I'm totally blanking the author's name right now.
Steve
Um,
Galland or something, or
uh,
something.
no,
No.
something. Anyways, Galland is one of the main characters. Tim Jared Reynolds is the narrator of it. But Galland and then Blaze they're like, they're the buddies. And Galan's kind of an evil bastard. You know what I mean? Like throughout, and you constantly see, like, he's like, I just kill him. And Blaze is like, you're just going to kill him? And that's that concept of that balance there. You know what I mean? He makes him question his moral decisions. And I think that's like kind of what you're saying in essence is you could start in like Galan starts off as more of a dick. Like he just doesn't care
Yeah.
about anybody. And as he progresses through the book, he builds upon his moral foundation. And even at moments when he's alone without Blaze, he's like, well, what would Blaze tell me in this moment? And
Yeah.
that's that relationship that brings him back to his moral compass of like,
And
well, maybe I shouldn't
even
murder this whole village, like,
exactly, even that small detail of you don't need to have a conscience, but you have a voice in your head from somebody who acts as a conscience and you listen to it, or
yes,
you at least consider it. That is growth. That's enough
that's
to
it.
make a character someone, because really that is the core of every single story, is growth and evolution. Or a lot of stories are remain the same despite the difficult, but that's a different kind of story. But
Yeah,
so many stories focus around change and evolution as a human being. So even if you go from, pitch black to a very, very charcoal shade of gray, you're still heading in the right direction. And
right.
that's enough for us as human beings to say, this is a character I can get behind. Maybe not all their actions, but their trajectory is the right way. So I'm good with that.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's a really good aspect to focus on, and because I know that there's definitely writers out there that want to write these very morally gray characters, and it's good for them to have an insight as to what those approaches are to be able to create a character that's still relatable. Because we're not all psychopath or sociopaths, so we want to be able to have something to relate to in the
Yeah,
humanity
we
of
need
it.
something.
Yeah, give us something. Oh, cool. Let's move on. I really like that, though. What were some of the most challenging issues you faced while writing your books, and how did you overcome them?
In terms of the writing process, or in terms of the marketing and business side of things?
Let's start off with the writing process and focus mostly on that. We've spoken a lot to the marketing, I think, so far, and I think let's focus on the writing.
I mean, every story presents, or I have sought out a story that presents a new challenge every single time that I write a new series. So, Darkblade was, how do I make the villain, half demon assassin with the cursed dagger that drives him to kill? That's like classic fantasy villain. How do I make him the main character people can relate to? Queen of Thieves, how do I write an 8-year-old girl? And what sort of journey does she go on? How do I even wrap my head around that? Heirs of Destiny was young adults. How can I write a young adult character and story that I, as an adult, would want to read, that would feel relevant to me? Silent Champions was, how do I write big military battles? Every story, every project that I take on is a new challenge in some way. So every single time it's something different. I spent so much time learning military strategy for the Silent Champion series. For the Cerberus series, I learned the ins and outs of the way a special forces operator thinks, which is totally alien to my very civilian brain.
Yeah.
So every single series has always presented a challenge. I think the biggest challenge at the end, though, comes down to, how do I convey this emotion and feeling most effectively? Because I always want to push that. I want you to cry when I do one of those terrible things to my characters, because you have loved them or come to care for them. So it's always, how do I do that better, differently, a new way when I've already done things in the past? Also, how do I continue escalating the story. Like with the Darkblade, we're going on book 10 right now. He has faced demons, he has faced bandits, he has faced fellow assassins, he has faced soldiers. How do I keep making a new threat that's interesting? How do I keep pushing his emotional growth forward? So it's always a challenge in some way.
Yeah. No, you've also touched on a few other aspects I find very intriguing and want to know a little bit more about as well. But from what hearing you say, a lot of the challenges is the research itself to really
Yes.
put on the character hats per se. You know what I mean? It's definitely something that I know a lot of the masters out there talk about in the regards of writing is you have to really embody the character when you're writing for them. And especially when you jump into their dialogue, you have to really understand their psychology, how, what's their backstory, how it affects them, how they're going to respond to these situations when they arise, and then what are they going to say in response to that.
Yeah.
And so those things I think are extremely important for a lot of writers to know, is that a lot of the work is research. You get to research all kinds of things that are way outside of your normal wheelhouse or your even, your normal reality. Like you said, writing Cerberus, that's, a warrior type in this day and age.
Diametric opposite from who I am. Yeah.
A guy sits, writes books all the time to a, guy who's an operator, you know what I mean, in warfare. And so I think it's a really intriguing aspect too, because again, we talked about how we also embody parts of ourselves in our characters as well. And so we get to like almost fantasize about ourselves being these characters, and it brings to light an excitement, I think, that happens in that process too. Although it is a challenge in an essence, it also becomes an exciting challenge, I think, too. Do you feel that when you're doing the research?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's kind of, I think, one of the things that I like to talk to authors about. It's like, because I get some of them like groan when I give them homework to like, hey, I want you to go back and research this. Like, tell me, I want to know their whole backs. Give me an arc of the character. I want to know their arc, first of all. And then I want you to spend some time researching, these specific things. He's a sword fighter. What's this terminology that you're using? That's not a sword fighter terminology. Like, research what he's a fencing style. He's using this kind of weapon. You need to know the stances and understand what that character is going to do, and then what he's going to say in response to those things. It makes the experience more immersive and realistic for the reader. Often when you are able to implement those small little details, that all of a sudden it's like it shows that you were willing to actually spend the time to give a fuck about what you were writing.
Exactly. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's beautiful. I think those are very valid challenges, and I think great ways of overcoming them in the process as well. And it's again going back to what you said. It's about hard work and perseverance. And I don't know. I've spent hours on research in comparison to the amount of time it actually took me to write the chapter. It took me more time to do the research than it was to write the chapter.
Typically, I try to avoid things like that. If I have to do that much research for something, I am doing the wrong thing. I mean, like for Darkblade 9, I had to learn a little bit about sailing and terminology, but I was like, I'm going to learn the bare minimum and figure out how not to have to write any more into this book.
And I think that you did the appropriate thing, because what I realized after my experience of delving into that it was too much. And I was like, man, like, I kind of wish that in essence, I had been writing more of a fantasy-based reality. Unfortunately, I was writing it into our real world, and that poses a lot more challenges, because you do have to know what streets they're going to be going down and how they're going to get from, because people will be like, I live in London, and that's not how that works.
No, and this is a massive driver behind my decision to write fantasy and sci-fi. I never want to be told, oh no, you can't do this, or I don't want to, like, if I want my hero to get from Los Angeles to San Diego in an hour to save the princess, and that's just not actually feasible, I'm gonna set my own world where somehow I make it happen, right? Like, I don't ever want to be bound by those kind of rules or really be forced to do that. And that's not to say that writers shouldn't do that. On the contrary, those who do that, they have my respect. I just don't want to be that guy. I am stubbornly independent. So I'm like, I am making my own rules.
So I came to a compromise with it. Mine is still a fantasy, and it is also an alternate reality. So guess what? in that alternate reality, that street didn't exist.
Done. Easy solution.
Or there was a building there, or they turned it into a park, or whatever I want to be. As long as you have enough similar references, it works
Yeah.
out. But yeah, I hear where you're coming from. Let's move on. How important is finding your own unique voice as a writer, and how did you find yours?
Oh, I think so. My approach to storytelling and writing is I'm just kind of, I would say I'm pretty middle of the pack in terms of I don't do super unique writing styles like writing voice where it's just like super compelling, super original. I keep my descriptions pretty simple. I try to get a little, poetic and flavorful here and there, but everything is pretty standard, I would say, for fantasy, epic fantasy. But I think the thing that makes my voice more unique or is just kind of leaning into my thoughts and feelings about situations or kind of my perspectives on these kind of things that I'm dealing with or the situations the characters deal with. And this is something that I know for a fact. No two authors can write the same character the same way. So I don't even have to try too hard to be unique in that sense. Um, I basically just have to do the most interesting and real and human thing in every scene and just do that scene after scene. And I'm the only one who will ever do it that way. So it becomes unique because of the mind and the voice behind it. Even if the dialogue is nothing super special and the magic systems aren't super original, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I just need to tell that really emotionally complex and vulnerable story that only I can. And I think that's probably the thing, the greatest defining factor about my writing style.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it down from all the stuff that we've discussed so far. I think that is what helps it stand out in that regard is it creates a emotional well and connection to you and your characters as we've discussed, you know what I mean, through your marketing promotion, but also through how you develop and write your characters into being. And I think, how you're wrapping the psychology of your characters and the themes and the story together. And I think that's, as writers are, that is what makes often, the unique storylines. Like you said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to create a new magic system. Although that it can be cool and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But again, I think what you hit on is, again, what we've already spoken to is the most valuable aspect that readers are looking for is that emotional connection. And I think, you as the writer, that, I think that is where a lot of your success comes from in that essence is that you're able to create these. And, no matter what, even if the themes are similar to other themes of stories, like you said, no one is going to ever write the exact same
yeah,
story. And you're going to have your own twists and plots, and your characters are going to be different, and how you relate to your characters and how you develop them through the process. And then how you're able to convey that to your readers. And I think that is what is, going to engage people the most. Yeah.
exactly.
Well, awesome. Let's keep it rolling. I like these shorter but quick, punchy ones that we're getting here. How do you deal with rejection and criticism, and how do you stay motivated?
So the rejection and criticism thing comes down to number one, as a creator, there's always going to be, imposter syndrome, anxiety, feelings of insufficiency. Accepting that means, okay, I suck or I suck to the capacity that I do. I'm just going to keep doing it. And I'm going to keep striving to be better. Right. And so in many senses, that is part of my motivation. It's why I keep taking on new challenges with every series. If everything was the same or if it was just as easy, I wouldn't necessarily feel that motivation. But if I'm struggling and I'm striving, there you have the motivation to keep going and pushing yourself creatively and making those hard choices creatively or emotionally and keep pushing on. I mean, bad reviews sometimes get to me, but it's very rare because I realize there are a lot of people who are never going to connect with my story, just like I'm never going to connect with a lot of people's stories. I have tapped out of some of the most popular books in the genre, in the world today, it's just not for me. So understanding that, I'm like, well, this book just isn't for that person.
Yeah.
Now, if my books didn't sell, if they got all crap reviews, that might be a little bit of a kick in the
Right,
teeth,
right.
a wake-up call. But because the books are selling, they're getting good reviews, people are connecting with me through them, I am telling the most honest story that I can. That's enough.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. And so something that we work with a lot in the Foundry is, an aspect of, internal self-talk. You know what I mean? This aspect of some of those things, the imposter syndrome, and oh man, I can't do this, or whatever those. Do you feel like that is something that you have struggled with, and you overcome that in the process of just being like, I need to just push through this? Or do you have like a process of like acknowledging those thoughts and being like, hey, how is this supporting me? Do you confront them, or do you move through them, I guess?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely an ignore and advance kind of guy.
I got you. Okay.
Um, well, because the truth is that those thoughts, like they're I have followed those thoughts down the rabbit hole, right? I'm not writing the best story I possibly could, which means I could work harder and write a better story. But then if I work harder, I could stress out and I wouldn't make as much money as I am. And then I would stress out for a totally different reason. And then I'd be feeling, so it's just like, no matter what I do, I'm never going to be good enough in some capacity. So I just don't listen. I tell people the voice never goes away. It never gets quieter. You are going to deal with creators' anxiety and those, imposter syndrome feelings of lack of self-worth for the rest of your life, because it's part of putting yourself on a plate and presenting it to people in the form of any art, whether it's cooking, painting, books, anything. There's always that. All you do is you just get better at ignoring it, or I think maybe potentially more healthy way, confronting it or using it, or embracing it in whatever capacity.
Yeah.
But then also you can kind of build up armor to it by your successes.
Right.
People have bought the Hunter's story, the Darkblade story, in some capacity for 6 years now.
Mm.
No matter how shit of a writer I am, I'm clearly not that shit of a writer, because people are buying it and continue to buy it. They don't just buy book one, they buy book two, and they buy book three. Like if book one was the only one that sold and nothing else did,
Mm.
it would mean, okay, the advertisement's working and then people buy it and then they never read it. But because book one is sold and then book two is sold and then book three is sold, I'm like, well, people are liking it. So I kind of have this foundation of, I've been doing this for 6 years, pretty much full time. I can't really be that bad. So anytime the voice comes up, I'm like, here, suck on this. Over here, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep going this way. You two, past successes and future anxieties. You have your war over here. Present me is focusing on the story, and often just getting through whatever chapter, losing myself in the story. That
Mm.
is enough for the most part. I am always going to be like, am I writing the best story I can? And I will take that with me as I write, and I will take that with me throughout the day, and I will always be thinking about it, but not to the level of anxiety or letting it stop me. It's more like, how can
Mm.
I do the most interesting, the most honest, the most dramatic, the most impactful thing at all times to write the best story I can? And as long as I'm doing that, as long as I can say with full confidence, I did that today when I wrote the chapter, even if it's not a chapter that I feel is phenomenal, I can be okay with that.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting process, and there's no wrong or right way to do it as long as you're succeeding in what you're trying to achieve. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, wallowing is wrong. Don't do that.
Well, that's it, but you're not going to succeed if you're wallowing.
Exactly.
I mean, you can do a little bit of wallowing, but you need to get moving. You know what I mean?
Schedule your wallowing.
Yeah,
5 minutes of wallowing a day.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
enough.
Have while you're drinking that cup of tea, getting ready to write, you can wallow for a little bit. Once you finish that cup of tea, you better start writing.
Absolutely.
So I get it. It's interesting and very insightful. Thank you for being open about that. I know it was a harder question, but it's one of those things that I think it's helpful for people as writers, and those are things, a big thing that a lot of people struggle with in that reality.
Yeah.
So,
And what's crazy is that the best writers in the world struggle with it too.
yeah,
talking with my favorite authors, getting insight into their processes. They are just as neurotic and anxious and stressed out about these things as I am in their own
Way.
special way.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it's like, okay, fine. Everybody deals with this and we just find ways to suck it up and move through it or push past it or fight through it or whatever the case is. So understanding that, it kind of reframes that it's never going away. Stop hoping it goes away, but just figure out how to cope with it and move past it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because Brandon Sanderson actually, in his new book, The Wind and Truth, he actually has a narrative, which is, Kaladin's main narrative, where he's literally talking to this other character about exactly this. That self-doubt, that anxiety. And it's like what Kaladin had to deal with in that. And it's so interesting in this day and age to see so directly focused into this reality. And obviously, like I said, there's no wrong or right way of doing it as long as you're able to still achieve what it is, and it's healthy and it's working for you, then right on, and that's kind of the beauty of that thing. And in that story too, Kaladin's having to like figure out how to help guide this person to finding out his way of then coping with those inner voices. It's just like
it's one of the things that I really resonated with in that story when he started introducing it was that the mental health aspect. It's not something you see a lot. It's something that I try to deal with in my stories. Anytime I see it in other stories, I admire the author for shedding a light on something that everybody has to deal with in some capacity or another. Remember, it's 83% of us. 83% of us are struggling with some kind of mental shit. So we just got to figure out how to get through it. And the more we talk about it, the easier it gets.
Yeah, that is the reality of it for sure. And it's definitely one of those things that I think we will constantly be learning about and evolving in ourselves. Yeah. Let's move on to what are some common mistakes you see new writers making, and how can they avoid them?
Okay, so we talked about rushing to launch. Don't do that.
Don't rush to launch.
Take your time.
Yeah.
Change your mindset. This is the first book out of the 50 or 60 that you're going to write over the course of your life. Set yourself up. Number 2, do not brand yourself as one single series. So many times an author has branded, they've made their social media profile, whatever, legends of blah, 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 tales of blah, blah, blah. Well, what happens when you finish that book? What then? Who are you going to be next? What happens if you decide to change genres? Like, don't brand yourself as a series, brand yourself as a person. Get people connected to you. They'll read whatever you write. Underpaying for covers. Bad covers are the most egregious error. And by bad covers, I mean covers that are below the market average. At the very, very tippy top, you've got the authors like Brandon Sanderson, right? They do shoot to be like them. Obviously, you're not going to afford $5,000 covers like he does, but that's your target. Don't go for the middle of the pack, bargain barrel. Don't do that. Go be the best that you can be. Make your covers better than average. You'll have a better chance of succeeding 100%.
Yeah. No, it's the brand identity is super important. And, it's one of those things I have conversations with, I'm working with another author by the name of Will Solomon, and he's, had a book that he put out. And when I first saw the cover, I was like, I would never read that. That's what I told him. I was like, I just looking at your book. I'm sorry, I would never read that. And so when I worked with him, I gave him that idea of like, go look at books that you have seen bigger authors and names use and find what styles they're utilizing and hone in on that and then apply it to your cover and they're selling well, and often, you go, tons of authors go through like 5 or 6, sometimes more covers for their books. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I told him that I said, don't feel like you're stuck with one. Don't feel like just because you have that one, that's what it's got to be, change it up and realize that when you do making sure that it is of a standard where if somebody sees it, because no matter what they say about judging a book by a cover, everybody does it and it's a reality.
Yep.
So you got to have something that's going to be like shabam. And people are like, ooh, that looks cool. That's just how
Yeah.
our brains work. So great. And thank you for sharing that. Those are some extremely helpful tools and insights into that reality. um, what advice do you have for aspiring authors when it comes to the publishing process?
I mean, the publishing process is probably the easiest part, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the writing the book, there's all the struggles there. The marketing the book is all the struggles. But between KDP, Ingram Spark, all those platforms, Kobo, all of that, the publishing aspect is really, really easy. The cover design aspect is hard. You just need to get help from somebody who knows, whether it's a fellow author or a service or somebody who can kind of shepherd you through the cover creation process. Same with the editing process. So really, if you can lock down the writing and the marketing, the publishing is probably the least stressful aspect of the publishing industry.
Yeah, and it's well, I mean, and you've already spoken to your success as as an indie author. I know that you mentioned that one of your first books was signed under a publishing company. Is that correct?
Yeah, but then I got the rights back and published it myself.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. Yeah, and so that's beautiful in essence, and in a lot of ways, is something I kind of wanted to speak to with you about was the reality of how important it is to be an independent author in this day and age. And there's a couple other things I'm going to mention too, but the aspect of being able to have ownership of your content, and like you said, all that publishers really are better at is marketing. And like that's the biggest part is
Not even, not even. They're good at publishing. They don't necessarily do the marketing.
well, they
Um,
usually, from the ones I've spoken with, and a lot of them have had to change over time as well to keep up with the demand of late. But from the ones that I've spoken with, a big part of their continued success and the only way they are able to survive in the market and sell people's books is by stepping up their marketing game. And that's what they've had to
okay.
do to compete with people like yourself in the indie world is they're realizing very quickly that they're not really given a lot for what they're taking, and that's kind of what the reality is. And there's aspects of this that even more I wanted to discuss with you is that I am starting to kind of form this idea of how I really want to engender this concept of independent authorship, ownership of your content. And I'm really starting to move authors towards the concept of things like book funnel. And I wanted to get your thoughts and insights in regards to that. And if you've played around with it as well, and whether or not you have been able to find success and value in that. I really personally dislike Amazon. I don't like how they treat anyone, and they don't really care about their people that make them billions of dollars every year. And so my thought process in regard to this and things that we're working on in the Foundry is starting to gear people to independent authorship, with obviously people out there that can help them give guidance where needed and give insights, and people like yourself as other authors. And, hopefully watching these videos gives them inspiration and insights on how to best approach their process. But about bringing back the ownership even further, where none of that money ends up in the pockets of Amazon, and where you would be able to keep all of your royalties. There's a few authors recently, and I'm starting to also see trends around social media, as well as a lot of fan bases are going, hey, do you have a book funnel access? I have the app. Like, I'm totally down. I want to buy the book directly from you, because no matter what, we can still charge, $10, $12 for the book, and we still make more audiobooks, and we still make more money than what Audible pays us out of our royalties. And if you're doing a royalty share plus, as you're probably well aware of, I don't know if you do that with your
Yeah.
narrator, if you just pay them straight out, but that reality is you're getting 40 to or 20% or less, from that share. And so I guess my greatest question is, have you looked into that, and is that a direction that you're considering going?
So there's two different products that we need to discuss in that sense audiobooks and then everything else, because there's two different ecosystems. Audible is one ecosystem and Amazon is another ecosystem. I do not think you will find authors that are making full-time income. You will not find very many, let me put it like this, that are making full-time income without using Amazon. You will have a hard time finding authors who are making full-time income with Amazon and published wide unless they have been doing it for many, many years and have a big fan base. The authors who are doing the most successfully are in Kindle Unlimited, which means Amazon exclusive. And I say this for the fantasy genre, right? This is my area of expertise. I know either personally or of 95% of the most successful indie fantasy authors. And I know for a fact that 95% of those are in Kindle Unlimited because that is where fantasy readers go to read. Now, let me add a caveat that people come to me and they say, hey, where can I buy your books? I can't sell the ebooks on my website because they are Amazon exclusive. So I have published, or I have kept books that are online exclusives for my website that are not available anywhere on Amazon. People have to come to my website and buy them delivered via book funnel. The amount of money that I have made off of them is probably less than I would have made had I put them on Amazon because there is no organic discovery. Now, I've been doing this for 1 year. Ask me again in 5 years after I have continued to push people towards the platform, towards my website, use Instagram and TikTok to drive direct sales.
That's it.
Gonna be a different answer, I guarantee it. But if you are a brand new author, the only way that you are going to make what I like to call fuck you money, which means just a whole awful lot.
I like it.
Is on Amazon because of the virality of books that get, seen, picked up by the algorithm, whatever. It happens, lightning strikes, something goes really, really well. People can make it work by doing direct sales and doing it wide. It's just a lot more of a grind. So what I would typically say is the best strategy is launch your book for the very first time on Amazon in Kindle Unlimited. Leave it there until you start to see the page reads and the sales drop. When it drops to a point that maybe you are concerned about the amount that you're making, take it out of Unlimited, go wide with it, and publish it on your website. Or just publish it on your website to get people to buy directly from you who don't want to buy from Amazon. Because remember, the more places people have to buy, the more places they're likely to buy. If there's only Amazon on your website, easy choice. They don't want Amazon, they go to your website. There you go. If they've got Amazon and Kobo and Nook and all these places, you're going to get your income kind of watered down and you're going to cater to this massive audience. Really, you want them to choose between Amazon, which is the biggest market share in the world by a wide margin, and your website directly. Those are the two options. So now audiobooks, I have not had a great deal of success on Audible because of selling rights to publishers who didn't do a lot with them. So this is a very different question. You would definitely want to talk to somebody who is more of an expert in that arena. I have gotten audiobooks done for my Kickstarter and published them on my website. I haven't driven a lot of traffic to them intentionally, so they haven't sold a bunch.
Okay.
But again, this is a long game. I know that in 5 years, I would love for 10 to 30% of my income to come from direct sales, which is going to be more paperbacks, which is going to be more deluxe editions, which is going to be more audiobooks and ebooks and all of that. The day comes that I'm making good money there, I would consider pulling my books out of Amazon exclusive. Until that day, Amazon exclusive for an indie author is the best way to make money on launch. Give yourself 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever, until you start seeing a dip, then consider doing the other solution. This is my advice based on the fantasy genre alone. Sci-fi may have some work, romantasy might be similar. I couldn't say, mystery, romance, all of those other genres, but for those genres at least, that's the best way to do it.
Okay. And so do you feel that it devalues the book in an essence when people are able to get it for free?
No,
No?
because they're not exactly getting it for free. And the kind of people who would get it for free, it's kind of like pirates. Book piracy is a thing. You're never going to get a book pirate to pay money for your books. So if you go hard to eradicate the piracy of your book, you're just stopping people from reading your book.
Yeah, yeah.
My books are up on piracy websites. I don't try to take them down because let's say 100 pirates read the book. They may like it. They'll start talking about it to their friends who may go pirate it, or some of their friends might happen to buy the book. Maybe they love the book so much they want a physical copy, they pay for it. But pirates, like Kindle Unlimited readers, are likely never going to pay good money for a book because pirates are going to pirate. Kindle Unlimited readers already pay for Kindle Unlimited. They don't need to spend any more. They've got all the options in the world. So reframing your mindset in that sense that they're not your target market, the kind of people who are going to pay for Kindle Unlimited, you can get them to read through your entire 15 book series in a month and you can make all that money. The kind of people who are going to pay for the ebook, they're going to pay for it wherever they're going to pay for it. So this is kind of the mindset switches. You don't need to worry so much about the devaluation of the book because people's enjoyment of your book is the same across the board, no matter how much they pay for it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's an interesting insight. It's something I personally try to steer people away from sometimes in that regard because it's an aspect of I don't know. There's a big part of me, in essence, and often the way a lot of people's mindset is that when that book is being given out, we don't know what Amazon is actually giving the author in return to that, and
Yeah.
that's the biggest part that I struggle with, and I obviously try to give them as much information. I've researched a lot about this. I've seen a lot of what Amazon has been doing and the lawsuits that are currently underway in regards to both Audible and what they're dealing with under Amazon as well. And it's concerning in a regard where it's I worked in the music industry for years, and it's just like Spotify. It's the
Yeah.
huge advantage being taken, and the artist being what makes them their billions is basically being disrespected, and we're just considered
Yeah.
basically slaves to them at this point, and they get to do and choose however they want to charge for it and whatever we don't have any power over it. And so that's why I'm like, my thought process is, and it sounds like you're just starting the process of that kind of personal ownership of your content and hosting some of it on your website. I would love to hear what your thoughts are in a few years as well in regards to that.
Yeah.
And from some of the authors that I have inquired about it, that they really started moving hard that direction, literally pulled all their content off of anything Amazon related, and all of their ad traffic goes directly to their website now. And so
Yeah.
everything's being sold through BookFunnel, and they are finding a quite good success. But they've also, as you mentioned, they have built a really good audience already that they're like, fuck yeah, we want to pay just money directly into your
Yeah.
pocket. And that's what the loyalty aspect that I think you were referring to is. You do
Yeah.
need to, and I still encourage all my new authors to do that, is please, we're going to publish on Amazon. If you're going to do an audiobook, it's going to go on Audible. At least for the first ones, you're going to be an exclusive, blah, 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 all this stuff. Unfortunately, it has to be up there for 6 years or whatever
Yeah.
the contract basically states, which I believe is 6 years. And, it's that reality of being able to get the visibility, as you mentioned, but also with the intention of the future books being released under your profile after we've spent time building up your email list, building up your social media, really getting a grasp on how your marketing works so that when you put everything onto your website, you're able to use those demographics and market aspects that you've learned from all the ads that you've run to then hone specifically to your website and making
Or you
sure.
just use it as another tool. For example,
Mm,
your book's no longer selling on Amazon. Great. Make it on your website, sell it there. You know how to do it. You've done the thing, but
right.
you've basically mined the gold from Amazon, and there is a whole lot of gold to be had there, right?
Yeah.
There is no doubt about it. The kind of people who are successful on Amazon are making insane amounts of money. The kind of people who are successful on their own direct sales websites are making good money. but not insane amounts of money. This is a very big distinction between the two. So obviously, Amazon is taking its cut, it's making its money, it's consolidating its position. But understanding the amount of money that's to be made on Amazon means
Interesting.
Amazon needs to be your main focus
Okay.
in the current market conditions. And I say this as tomorrow Amazon shuts down, the game's changed. Today, right now, Amazon is leading the pack. Play Amazon's game today, but plan how to play your own game in the future. So publish your series on Amazon. Make as much money from it as you can. The day it stops making you money, then do it on your website. Go and then have your next series up on Amazon, and then do the same thing. Write a series that's an exclusive for your website, or write a book that's an exclusive for your website and test that out.
Yeah.
But treat Amazon as your main focus and everything else as another piece of the puzzle. Use social media to drive direct sales from your website. Don't send them to Amazon, because those people are connecting with you. Now, use some of your social media traffic to direct the sales to Amazon, because that's where you're going to pick up, the new releases.
Yeah.
But everything is about taking all those tools. BookFunnel is an amazing tool if it's used correctly, but nothing is going to happen on its own organically.
Right.
And that's not the case on Amazon. Amazon, things can happen organically.
Right.
So use them. Leverage that to your maximum effect, and then figure out what to do if or when the money does not come in or stops coming in.
Yeah. Well, I think that's extremely helpful, and something that I know I've been thinking about. I've talked a lot with a bunch of different people and people in the industry for a while. And it's very much what you're saying is what I've heard a lot of from people, even though it really still just irks me because,
it sucks.
It
sucks.
Yeah.
That they can take so much of the, of the money from, my paperbacks are the price $25. I get $5 for each sale. Right? It's painful. Yeah. And that's why for paperbacks, I'm driving the sales directly to my website.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the majority of people who have continued to buy my books for the last 6 years, they've done it through Kindle Unlimited because it's the most affordable. I pay for Kindle Unlimited. I read most of the books that I get on Amazon through Kindle Unlimited. It's just the way that's the most affordable, considering I can read, 10 books in a month. I can't afford to buy 10 books. I can afford to pay Kindle Unlimited. So all of a sudden, it's a totally different demographic that you're reaching. You're reaching the kind of people who will go deep. I have, I don't even know. We're going to call it 36 books currently in my same fantasy world, all in Kindle Unlimited. Readers can go through all of them. That's a whole lot of money that I never would have gotten if they had to pay for each ebook or paperback individually. But because it costs them nothing, Amazon is paying me all this money for people to read 36 books. So this is where it's a different mindset, especially if you are like me, you write big series or multiple series set in the same world.
And so, from how I understand it, is there's a really unclear aspect of how much they are paying you per page or per word on Amazon.
No, it's always clear. It's clear every month.
It is. Okay, because I've never been on the end of actually looking at any of that documentation, because I have not personally published anything.
Yeah.
And so I've been looking into it, and I've had mixed reviews as people saying whether or not the numbers actually add up. Is your...
It's rough math, napkin math. But it is sort of universally accepted accuracy. In the sense that when I know that I get 1 million page reads in a month, I know more or less how much it's going to make me. Amazon will tell me how much they're paying out for that month. The numbers may change slightly, but overall it's pretty accurate napkin math. So there have been authors who have been tracking it for years, and they publish it, they post about it every single month. Here, this month's royalty rate is whatever. So it's not 100% clear, but it's also not quite so nebulous.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I've been hearing, is that it's there, but it's not there. Yeah. Which is, again, really another aspect of like, but it's good. I think you're also bringing to light the aspect that it does add value, and that it is important to utilize that as one of the sources for indie authors to really make sure that they're playing all of their fields well. And I really like
Yeah.
how you're talking about the strategy specifically behind that and how to create ownership, over time of that content as
Yep.
well, and how to cycle it. You know what I mean? That's
Yep.
I think extremely important insight from your experience. And I'd love to, again, like I said, I'd like to see in the next few years what that looks like
Yeah,
when
for sure.
when you've done more of it in direct publishing through your website. So be really
Absolutely.
interesting. Yeah. I've got one last question in my general questions, and then I briefly wanted to touch on just some of your new releases and stuff like that, as well as talking about your involvement with some of the collaborators. But my last question here is, what's next for you as a writer? Are you working on any new projects?
Yeah, so I was tapped this year to do what I'm calling the Secret Trilogy. There is no official announcement yet, so I can't talk about it, but it is a trilogy set in an existing world that may spawn more books depending on performance. I am collaborating on two other projects, both of which are very much in their infancy, but which are very exciting, while also writing Darkblade 10 through 15 and plotting two other projects with co-authors. So, like I
Amazing.
say, I think ahead. I think ahead. My next 2 years are planned out.
No, that's really good. It's good to have a strategy in place, and I think it's extremely beneficial. Especially once you have momentum going, like you do, you have to stay relevant and consistent with stuff coming out, because
Yeah,
that's how you also maintain selling previous books and keeping the income revenues happening in that process.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot of the projects that you're going to be putting out, and also very excited to see who you're collaborating with. Is that a secret too? Are we not allowed to know?
It is. It is currently secret, with some exciting news coming soon. That's kind of the best I can say. Just
Okay.
because of how busy I am, I don't know how soon I will be able to push these other projects forward. The secret projects should be announced hopefully mid 25.
Okay. Okay.
But I
Well,
will have already written the 3 books by that time. So
got you.
it'll be a foregone conclusion at that point.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Well, I just kind of I have a couple questions here. I have the Queen of the Night Guild Deluxe Edition, fully funded book 3 of the Queen of Thieves. Can you tell us more in this? It's been fully funded in this deluxe edition, and I've seen little bits and bobs of it. Um, you know, we talked a little bit about your Kickstarters and how you kind of go about that. I guess the involvement is, I guess, is unavowed. Sorry, that's the second one. Is Broken Binding. What is your relationship with them? Because it seems like they do a lot of your special editions. Is that correct?
So no, so I am like a social media rep for Broken Binding. They send me the books, as you can see this beautiful thing right here. Or
Yes.
can you see this on
No.
this thing right here?
Okay. There we go.
This
There it
is
is.
there.
Okay.
And then I promote it on social media, right? I make videos with it, I post about it, all of that.
Okay.
That is my involvement with the Broken Binding currently. There are things potentially in the works, but that's very much down the road.
Okay.
The deluxe edition of the Kickstarter, this is an example of cycling content. The Queen of Thieves series, when I relaunched it on Amazon, I made some mistakes and it didn't go anywhere. So the sales trickled off, but I knew that the story had merit. It is potentially one of the best series that I've written. It just didn't sell because of mistakes that I made based on Amazon's algorithm. So rather than letting the series languish in misery, let's do something with it. Hence was born the idea behind the deluxe edition. So the series, people love the series, right? A lot of my hardcore fan base came from that series, or they have fallen in love with that series as they read it because it's connected to Darkblade and all the other ones. So I knew that there would be the market for it. So I just got I just researched how to do it, talked to all my author friends, and then kind of my approach to all these things is just throw yourself in the deep end and figure it out as you go. So three campaigns in, I've somewhat cracked the code to the best of my extent. I could always level up, which I intend to for future projects, but but I'm very happy with how this one came out.
Mm.
The 3 books, they were all written in 2017, 2018. So the series has been complete for years. They are the series that I'm selling through my website directly, in fact. So I can offer the ebook as one of the options because it's not Amazon exclusive. The audiobooks are also available on my some of the audiobooks are available on my website. That is one of the series that I'm using to test direct sales with.
Gotcha.
And then the fact that I can sort of get some more life out of it by using the Kickstarter to drive more income is just bonus. And I get pretty books to add to my shelf too. Readers get what they want. It's kind of a win-win.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, it's kind of what I was sensing there was that you know that's all like you said. It's a when doing the deluxe edition, it's like revamping the like, hey, guess what? If you didn't get the chance, or you hadn't even checked it out, or you just read the first one, like this is your opportunity to get your hands on this book. And I think it's like you said, a very strategic way to recycle and to also remind people and potentially draw in some new fans. So.
100%. Since I started launching it, I've gotten a bunch of people because Kickstarter has its own ecosystem. People on Kickstarter, they will never buy an ebook off of Amazon. It's just not what they do. They will only buy pretty deluxe edition books on Kickstarter, or maybe they'll buy paperbacks because they're a little cheaper. But so it's building a whole new audience on top of my ads and my newsletter and my social media and all that. It's just one more piece of the great big puzzle.
Yeah. No, I think that's brilliant. You've given us all a lot of insights and some really cool, looks into how your process works, and also, added a lot of value to and broken down some of the illusions, I guess. That's kind of the process that I like to do and work with, and also to offer to a lot of the authors that we work with is we want to break down the illusions, you know what I mean? To take away the falsities that people have this assumption that they write a great book and they put it out and people should just buy it. And it's just, that's not the reality. And so it is not. And,
oh boy, it's not.
And publishers aren't really a necessity in this day and age when we have the power to do all of it ourselves. And like you said, the most powerful tool in your wheelhouse is good brand identity and good marketing. You know what I mean? And I would say that that's something that is constantly we encourage and reinforce in what we do at the Foundry. And it's really also helpful to hear the struggles that you have as well as a writer, as well as how you overcome them, and also to get some insights to how you write the psychology and wear the hats of your character. And that's such a valuable aspect that I think that a lot of writers sometimes struggle with, and to know that it doesn't require a ton of research, but you can also get to that place in a way where you research what is necessary to understand for that character. And again, overwriting descriptive scenes is not pushing the narrative. And you'll probably lose a chunk of your interest from people like the people that can't read, the Lord of the Rings series, because he loves to describe what at the edge of the mountains. You're just like, okay, it's a mountain. There's sun, there's clouds, it's whatever, move on. So I really appreciate your time today in all of this. And I'm really looking forward to, seeing these new projects. I'm really looking forward to seeing your success in regards to, marketing through your own platforms and seeing how that evolves as well. And looking forward to, interviewing you here in the future as well. And maybe next time we'll do a live and get people in that reality as well.
Sounds great.
Well, I appreciate your time today, Andy, and I'm going to stop recording.